Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast, where we drop the pressure, find the joy, and thrive, even when it feels like life is stuck on level 12 hard. I'm Amanda Diekman, author, autistic adult, and mom of 3. I'm not here as an expert, but a fellow traveler. Together, we're learning how to live more gently, authentically, and vibrantly in this wild parenting life. In today's podcast, I am answering 4 of your questions that you've written in and shared to me about screen time. In the first question, we're getting into a more theoretical discussion about whether or not allowing your kids to watch screens in your house is like letting young kids smoke cigarettes in your house, and really getting into the questions about whether screen time is inherently addictive and how we can destigmatize and de-shame our kids' screen use, especially for neurodivergent kids and kids in burnout. In our second question, we have a family that's newly dropping screen time limits and a parent that's really wrestling with those long days where their kid is just watching YouTube for 12 hours. And then in our last question, we're going to talk about Roblox spending and any other high spendy game. In this case, this is a kid who's in phase 2 of burnout, and it's a really common reality that in phase 2 of burnout, kids get really spendy on their screens. So we're going to talk about the role of saying yes to our kids and the healing function of novelty and creativity in game use. So let's get into it. Here are your trickiest questions about screens.
Is allowing screen time, especially for young kids, like letting your kids smoke cigarettes in your home? So first of all, I think it's really awesome that you asked this question, and I'm so glad because it opens up important conversation. I think it's really important to listen to yourself and to the kinds of narratives that are happening inside of you and the fears and concerns that are rising up when you think about the low demand life. And it reminds me of something that I think is really important to distinguish between when it comes to low demand. That low demand is an approach. It's a series of steps. It's a way of being in relationship to your child. It's not an end result. So it's not like a litmus test where you can only consider yourself low demand if you're doing certain things, if you're unschooling, if you have no screen time limits, if you have no bedtime, if you let your kids eat whatever they want. That is not it at all. Low demand is for what is too hard for your child. And how can you get your needs met in a way that is honoring what is too hard for the kid in front of you? Choosing connection, alignment, and attunement over how this is supposed to be or how we thought it would be, our imagination or our fantasy of what our kid would be like. We choose the real child in front of us over the fantasy. That's what low demand is all about. So if for your family and your child, no screen time limits does not open up trust and freedom and connection, then it's probably not the right step for your family. It may not be a demand that's too hard for your child. I would give a few caveats, things to think about as you're pursuing these questions about screens. So first, getting rid of screen time limits or reducing the number of screen time battles can be incredibly life-giving. When you are enforcing that limit and it is really too hard for your child, it's breaking down trust and connection. When the screen time limit is becoming more important than it really needs to be, it's coming between you and your child. It's inhibiting your ability to listen to them, to connect with them, and to trust them. If you feel like I can't trust my child with this, then that might be a red flag that you want to dig a little deeper there. But of course, it totally makes sense. If you are operating from a highly addictive substance mindset, you think, of course I can't trust my child with this. Who could possibly trust their child with this? And I guess that's where I would offer that those of us in the community who do choose to have total screen autonomy can be a witness that it is possible to remove screen limits and not lead to screen time addiction. I have personal questions about the addiction narrative when it comes to screens in the first place. The reality is we just don't have enough research about the impact of screens on kids' brains in a longitudinal study, especially neurodivergent kids, because the anecdotal evidence is that screens are a really important regulating tool for neurodivergent kids and adults. But obviously the scientific literature isn't there on that question. So we just are guessing right now, and you have to make the right best guess for your family. What we have learned in reducing the number of barriers that we put on screen time is that it stopped stigmatizing, and it also stopped shaming the kids' love for screens. It made room for them to be honest about that love and to be seen and encouraged in it, which then made them trust us more and bring other kinds of loves. And so we have seen that while their screen time use initially went up, it has absolutely come down, and that a lot of that going up had to do with burnout, that we were dropping screen time limits during burnout. I think if we had dropped those limits in another context or at another time, it wouldn't have been such a dramatic increase or stayed so high for so long. So the question about screen time, here are the nuts and bolts. Our son is spending 8 to 14 hours a day on YouTube. They've been doing this process for about a month now. So I would still say that's pretty early in the process for your son to be learning how to regulate his own screen time and to trust this process. So still early. Some days you have plans and he doesn't use the screen all day, but you're feeling like he's having a harder time doing anything else other than YouTube. I think there's some fear coming up around this. The fear being like, what if this isn't working? What if he's going in the wrong direction? Should you put screen time limits back in place in order to keep him like more socializing? I'd say in terms of where you are in the process, about a month in, you're all beginning to wonder if this is going to stick or not. Is this permanent, or is this just a thing that we tried out for a while? Because the memory of how it used to be before is still really potent. It's potent for you and it's potent for your son. You haven't really gotten to the full trust building part yet, which is when you commit to this and sink into it a bit deeper, and it becomes more a way of life. This is how we do it now. We wouldn't want to go back to our old way because this new way is obviously so important to us and to our family culture. You can't be there after a month, and you shouldn't expect yourself to be. That would be unrealistic. Instead, where you are right now is a really important place to be. It seems like your son is really experimenting because on some days he is able to do more of what you would expect from him. I assume that your expectations still involve socializing, friendship time, leaving the house, that those would be a part of his daily rhythm. That's still your expectation. He's meeting those expectations, it sounds like, on some days. But on other days, it's hard for him to meet those expectations, and he's watching YouTube all the time. So a couple of thoughts about that. One is that there's some room for you to do more digging into why certain activities are elevated above others. Is it possible for you to see just as much value in his YouTube time as you do in like an outing to the park? Press yourself to see what it is that he's learning. What is he getting out of this? How is this regulating his system or feeding his curiosity or giving him a sense of control, a sense of autonomy? How is this meeting his needs? Already in a month, you've been able to nuance like, okay, he needs food and alone time when he's using his tablet, but he wants more socialization and more connection when he's playing his games. Okay, so that gives you a sense of where he is and what his needs are in those times, and it's a way he can communicate that to you. So I've noticed for my son that a very similar thing is in place. So on days where he's doing a lot of watching YouTube, it also tells me that he needs a lot of alone time that day. And we try to really protect that because he's getting his needs met, and him being in touch with himself and in touch with his own needs and having a range of ways to meet those needs is my ultimate goal. I would begin to recognize, if possible, that your son is doing something very important and that you want to protect it in the same way that you would want to protect other things that you value more, perhaps, like socializing. As a culture, we do have a hard time with people who need a lot of alone time. We tend to
hold up people who are more extroverted and get their energy more by doing things over people who like to be at home and to be in a safe place, resting or away from others in order to recharge. And that's just a value judgment that we're making on two different ways of being human. So it's not just you, as a culture, we do this. And it sounds like right now, at least, and we can't make any projections about the future because you're still really early on in the process. But at least right now, your son is needing some of these really long days of refueling and recharging. I wonder if you could give him any more verbal affirmation of what you see him doing. Very minimal. Many of our kids are going to be mostly reading our energy. So working on your own energy about how you feel about the screen time is probably going to be the most productive. But I wonder if you could affirm it like, oh, wow, you're having a really wonderful, restful day today. I see the way that you're using YouTube. I wonder what you're watching that's so interesting. It must be so really good to get this restful day. Just put a few words to the really positive things that you see and what he's pursuing. And then you can always make a connection between what he's pursuing and something else that you want him to pursue, like another tool for how he can get rest. Like, I also find it really restful when we lay on the couch and watch a movie together. And if you ever want to do that, I would also be here to have that kind of a restful day, creating a category of a restful day, and that there are many ways that we can meet that need. But right now, his chosen way is through YouTube, and you want to affirm his choices and his autonomy and his wisdom in every way that you can, so that he will begin to see himself as wise and autonomous and in charge of making good decisions.
For our third question this podcast, we have a parent who's really overwhelmed with the amount of money that her kiddo is spending on Roblox, and it came to me with a kind of innovative idea about asking friends and family members to contribute to the Roblox fund, but wondering if this is even a good idea and maybe if she should be taking more of a boundaries approach, limiting the amount. Just what do I do when my kid is spending more money than I have in Roblox? And I honestly surprised myself with how clear my answer was to this question, especially for kids who are in phase 2 of burnout. So I want to talk about what phase 2 is first, and then how spending on screen time becomes such a big part of this phase. So first of all, when kids are in burnout, they often move through 3 overlapping, blurry, but distinct phases. Phase 1 has everything to do with screens because I call it screens all day. Burnout comes from too much for too long, and it's characterized by a major drop-off in skills, exhaustion over a prolonged period of time, and high sensory sensitivity. So when you put all those things together, it kind of makes perfect sense that the system needs to power down. You need something you can do all day that is minimally taxing and maximally restorative. And for many of us, watching videos, it's such a great way to turn off the expectation that you be doing 1,000 things, and instead you can fill your time with enjoying watching those other people do that. And y'all, I know that this is really stigmatized. Like, we have brain rot, we have rotting in bed, binging screens, such pejorative and pretty awful terms, to be honest. But that's the main thing that's needed in phase 1 of burnout, is just rest. So parents tend to freak out during this season because it is just so shockingly shameful and stigmatized to see your, before this, fairly ordinarily functioning kid to suddenly depend on screens like it's their lifeblood for 12 hours a day. It's just terrifying. And as we talked about in the previous question, there's a lot of ways to embrace rest and to really affirm our kids' wisdom in knowing what their bodies need. But then phase 1 ends. Like, suddenly they just want to do stuff. And I call phase 2 curious but no capacity, because they want to do stuff, but they don't have any capacity to manage the inevitable ups and downs of life that emerge when you start doing stuff. So they're curious, they need novelty, they need freshness, they need challenge, and they blow up over the tiniest things. They melt down way more in public. This can be a more aggressive phase because they're like, I want to make an Eiffel Tower out of pixie sticks. And you're like, okay. And you start to build them, but you can't do it fast enough or it falls apart, or you don't have pixie sticks and they don't sell them anywhere. And like suddenly, right, they're wailing on you. And you're like, wait, I would pay money for you to go back to your room and YouTube. One of the things that often happens in phase 2 is that our kids crave newness. They need it. It's not a want. It's absolutely a need. It's a part of what's happening in their burnout recovery process. So for one of my kids, his thing was RC cars. And literally every couple of days, he needed a new RC car. And as soon as it would come in the mail or we'd find it in a store, he'd find something wrong with it. It would fall apart. It wouldn't drive just right. Huge mega meltdown. We'd hate RC cars for a day or two and then go right back and start the cycle all over again with an obsession about a new one. And it was just unrelenting. And then in another phase, different kid, different burnout, they had that same craving, that urge for novelty in terms of hobbies. So it was gymnastics. I need to learn how to do a flip. And then it was, I want to learn breakdancing. And then it was fencing. And it was, of course, way too hard to join a scheduled class. And so I had to find private teachers and coordinate care for my other kids so that we could pull this off. It was so intensive and unrelenting. And so that I just know it's not about the screen itself. It's not about the video game Roblox. It's not about wanting a new skin in Fortnite. What happens in phase 2, which is that curiosity, that desire, that creativity, that newness, that sparkle and spice for life, it turns back on, but it's kind of a rough turn on. It's like it revs into overdrive. It hasn't found that happy medium yet where just moving through life feels like enough. In phase 2 of burnout, it does not feel like enough. You have to turn up the volume on everything in order to meet that need for novelty. And so what happens is that in phase 2, spending in video games can feel off the charts. It's like, okay, I'm comfortable spending X number of dollars a week, whether that's all your budget allows or that's just all your ethics and your heart can allow. And then, but your kid is like doubling, tripling that. Like every single game they get into, they need to unlock the next world, or they want all the skins, or they want to buy the pets. And what I want to say is that the value of investing in this particular season, because by stage 3 and into healing from burnout, it's just not like that anymore. You're going to shift from working with someone who has zero capacity to working with someone whose brain is functioning, who can talk about budgets, who can make wise decisions about how they want to spend their money. Like that's coming. Absolutely. It's a unique period when this need is overwhelming and the capacity for nuance around it is very low. So here's the gift. By inviting in friends and family to help support, you are giving them a concrete way to enable you to grow your relationship with your child. The magic of low demand isn't dropping the demand. It's the relationship of trust and safety and collaboration that grows in an environment of genuine autonomy and respect. When both people in the relationship know that they are safe, that they are seen, that they are loved just the way they are. By inviting in your friends and family to pour money into this account, first of all, you're telling your kid, like, hey, look at all these people who care about you. They know what you love. They want to invest in you. They want to see you grow. What a great opportunity. Maybe you could create a YouTube channel for your kid to be the YouTuber, for them to screen record their progress they're making in their games and share it with their grandparents or their neighbors or your friend from college who knows what you're going through and wants to give you lots of love. It's a way to broaden their world, to give them followers, which is something a lot of these kids are really into for a season. The other thing that you get to do is when the people invest in this fund, it's like it's giving you the power to say yes. It is giving you the most potent magical currency that you have, which is saying, absolutely, yes, I see what you are passionate about and I want it to grow. I want to see you learn. I want to see you come to life again. And what you love, I love. That is the greatest power that you have in this particular phase. Other things will come in later. I want to emphasize that. This is not forever. This is why the addiction narrative is so unhelpful. You're not actually creating a kid who's gonna forever get their kicks out of spending money on Roblox. You're not feeding some sort of insatiable need inside of them. In fact, as you feed it, it decreases in power, because your trusting connection grows. They heal, and their brain power and their ability to hold nuance and complexity grows. And so by the time you're done with phase 2, you have a whole different conversation partner who can hold a whole different kind of conversation about what kind of spending they want to have online. I promise. I have seen it happen over and over again. So for right now, for this season, the most powerful thing you have to offer your child is your wholehearted yes. This is something your family and friends can actually do for a family that's in burnout. There's so many times that our people, our community wants to step in and support us, and they literally can't, because our kids can't stay with anybody else, because they can't be put to bed by anybody but us, because they live too far away and they can't provide the kind of hands-on care that we would desperately like to have. But man, this is something they can do. So let yourself say yes to that support, and then let that support help you say yes to your kid. And just what a gorgeous environment of radical acceptance to wrap both of you up in as you move through this most intense and most difficult phase of burnout.
If this podcast is speaking to your soul, you can subscribe through wherever you get your own podcasts. Even better, if you feel the nudge, head on over to Apple Podcasts in particular and leave us a review. It's such a helpful way for new people to also get to experience what this podcast wants to bring into their lives.
I'm Amanda. Remember, it takes great strength to let things go. I'll see you next week.